Welcome to EETTO and my opinion on today's Canadian federal budget that just came down within the last hour or so. I was struck, I must say, by the amount of honesty that our conservative government has put in front of the public today. Honesty about nothing. Virtually, absolutely nothing. So here's what I've come to a conclusion on with respect to a theme, is that our government, who promised us transparency, have actually delivered on that. Is it a good thing? I'm not so sure, but it is a little startling as to how transparent they are. Let me give you an example. Last week, they brought down a bill called the Fair Elections Act. And this was widely discussed in our country with respect to the role of the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada. And there are many good things in there, but there were some rather disturbing things in there as well. The Chief Electoral Officer, if this bill is passed, which no doubt it will with our majority government, will no longer be able to speak publicly, in writing or verbally, on any topics other than how to vote, where to vote, when to vote. That's it. That's all. No more discussions, commercials, or any sort of ability to spend money on getting out the vote campaigns, educating Canadians about our democracy, encouraging the youth vote, which is staggeringly low in our country, to understand the importance of casting a vote, or even making the general public aware of the fact that, you know what, you may not remember, but there's hundreds of thousands of people in the last 100 years that have gone to war to ensure that you have the ability to cast your ballot. So this whole voter turnout thing is now no longer within the purview of Elections Canada. Moving on with another example relevant to today. Today's budget, if you crunch the numbers between the contingency fund that the federal government maintains, which is almost $3 billion, and the fact that this year they're anticipating a $3 billion deficit, they are not calling it a balanced budget yet. Admittedly, careful management of spending and revenue. Yes, we are virtually in a balanced budget. But boy, we don't want to give that phrase away just yet. And I think you know why. But here is the real irony of the whole thing. If you think back a few minutes ago to what I said about the new Fair Elections Act that's before Parliament right now, under a time constraint, with very minimal consultation with the public, and when you really think about it, how Elections Canada operates is an arm's-length agency of us to ensure a fair and democratic electoral system. Well, here's an interesting thing. Overall voter turnout has been declining, but for people under 25, it's actually as high as low as in the low 20% rate for showing up at the polling station to cast your vote. The youth of this country either have never voted since they turned 18 or have stopped voting for whatever reason. So when you look at polling results and you see that the Conservatives achieved a majority government based on roughly 1/3 of the population that voted, and you run a poll across the board and an 18-year-old answers the telephone and says, "Oh, I'm going to vote Liberal," but Buddy never shows up at the polling station and the government knows it, then you know what? We don't really have to pay that close attention to programs driven at youth, in particular youth unemployment, which was virtually untouched in today's budget. Now, yes, they did announce an internship program, which, according to the numbers that I saw, could possibly help less than 10% of people in post-secondary education who would like to have a job but can't find one. But you know what? When we go back to the whole election stuff, this is the same group of people that don't show up to vote anyway. So who really cares if we don't throw a lot of money at these people? It doesn't really matter, because the people who vote are the middle class parents that are strapped for cash, and that's what this budget was driven at for next year, because everyone's anticipating that rather than waiting till his 5th year of his mandate, Mr. Harper is going to announce an election in about a year and a bit, which puts us well into about 4.5 years in office, which means fiscally at that point, unless we have another disaster, the economy will be noticeably stronger. He will be then able and willing to declare that we have a $3+ billion surplus. And oh, by the way, here's some goodies we're going to do for you, Mom and Dad. We're going to allow income splitting. That's going to have a dramatic impact on the amount of income tax that families are paying. And behind the scenes, if I was the Prime Minister, I'd be saying, kids under 29, they don't vote. Why would I spend money on people under 29? And I don't really care if anybody knows. That's the thing that just blows my mind about this, is that whether they're intending to be blatantly open about their flagrant politicking between putting in a legislation which is going to further do nothing to encourage young people to vote, and then bringing down this pretty bland do-nothing budget today, which is not going to help youth unemployment one iota. And admittedly, everyone's saying, well, yeah, that's what we all expect because we're already into the next year's election. This is a whole electioneering thing, and you bet your bottom dollar that next year the budget is going to be all chock full of goodies. And I'll bet you anything, those goodies will be directed at the very demographics of people who actually do show up at the polling booth. And one last thing, because God knows I've got to get my opinion across. The transparency of all of this is astounding. I don't know whether to consider Mr. Harper a political aficionado, a prodigy, a genius, or someone who just doesn't give a crap if we know or don't know that he's politicking around. He's a great politician if this is all true. So my opinion is that there's transparency in the sense that, yeah, we want to know what our government is doing, what they're spending, and why, and we'd like to be consulted. And then there's transparency that allows us to look through the telescope at 24 Sussex Drive and see the arrogance and the I don't care what they think happens attitude, because I'm going to win again anyway. So I'm just going to jolly well just do what I want. Well, that's my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours. So for EETTO, this has been Dave on Budget Day in Canada. Have a great evening.